Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Para Rodeo Presents, a weekly discussion on all things gig economy related, hosted by myself, Steve Rodeo, and David Pickerell, the CEO from Para. Each week we do different guests, and this week we try and have the three-man panel and David and I, so a total of five. But for this week, we have chosen to just go with two because this week I'm extremely happy to have Sergio and Chris. For those of you not familiar with these gentlemen, you will be here shortly. And they have a great weekly show called Show Me the Money Club on YouTube. And I don't know if you're on other platforms too. I think you're on Facebook, maybe.
Yeah, it's on all major podcasting platforms. So
I mean, when you're live, though.
Anywhere. The live is on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. And YouTube.
Yep.
Which you can find under the Rideshare Guy handle. So Sergio and Chris, welcome. And can you guys tell us a little bit about your roles at TRG and background with the gig economy before we get started?
Sure. Chris, you go ahead first.
Okay. I'm Chris. You probably see me on the Rideshare Guy as well as my other channel. But yeah, I've been doing videos for the Rideshare Guy for a couple of years now. I'm also the YouTube manager there, so I manage everything when it comes to anything YouTube. And my background when it comes to the gig economy, Uber and Lyft. I've been doing Uber in Charlotte, North Carolina is where I started originally in 2015, then moved back to Buffalo, New York, where I've been doing Uber and Lyft for several years now. Part-time, full-time, a little bit of time off, doing Spark as well. Signed up for that. So it's been pretty fun on that avenue. And signed up here and there for some other apps just to have in the background. Never really have taken them too far, but pretty much just enjoyed Uber and Lyft rideshare, and then now doing Spark as well.
Hey, Sergio. I'm with the Rideshare Guy. I started actually with the Rideshare Guy in 2018. Been a driver on both platforms since 2017 or late 2016. Still a driver as well as a consumer, a passenger as well. I also do obviously some deliveries. For the last 4 or 5 months, I started doing a lot more deliveries actually, due to the fact that rideshare is kind of having its winter. I switched to, well, I didn't switch. I still write for the blog, but I'll probably do an article a week for the Rideshare Guy. But now me and Chris, we're doing this live stream over the last 6 months called Show Me the Money Club, and I'm the co-host. And we're doing terrifically well, and we're glad to be here.
Yeah, you guys are crushing it over there. And by the way, you guys, all of their information can be found in the show notes here. So please give them a check out, subscribe. You're probably familiar with the Rideshare Guy, but look into what these guys do as well. The Rideshare Guy has tons of stuff out there, but these guys are doing something on that channel. They do lots of things on that channel, but they're doing something different on that channel that's really cool. I like watching the show. We were just laughing before we started that these guys seem to be time challenged on sticking to some
That's
kind of hour and a half
That's
stream.
that's mostly my fault, Steve.
Yeah, it originally started supposed to be an hour, and the last couple were 2.5 hours. So a little
I saw that the
over.
last one went over 2 hours. I was like, whoa, these guys
Hey,
like
Steve,
are.
you've never done that before.
I know, but I mean, these guys are doing like marathon ones now.
No,
It's like,
you have.
We're
I
actually
know,
we're
I
actually
know.
thinking of doing a 24-hour one.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
you can do that. I'm going to sit back and let you do a 24-hour stream. I'm good.
Look, we all know Dark Road Run. Chris and I spent a lot of the pandemic watching his stuff, and we talk. I know Chris talks cameras and stuff with him a lot, and you guys know him, but he's done a couple, and I've seen the shape he's in after him, so I'm good without doing those.
Oh, they're rough. They are.
and you know, cheers, kudos to Dark Road Run. Always putting out good stuff. I don't all the time know what it's about, you guys, but check that out too. But we have some topics here. Since we have these guys on, I really wanted to kind of dive into what they've been doing on Show Me the Money Club and talk about some of the things going on with rideshare. The past few weeks, we've been talking about a lot of delivery and holiday shopping and things like that. But I want to jump into some rideshare. And I picked some topics that I think these guys hit, one of which I know these guys hit on almost weekly. That is the third one we will get to. But first, I want to ask you two how you see. I don't even know if I want to talk about the pandemic because it was just, we all know now. But the last year, so this 2022 calendar year, how do you, like, not financially, not that they're still not posting profits, but Uber could have this last quarter, none of that. But how do you think for the drivers, if you were making some kind of chart, this last calendar year would look?
Yeah, I mean, let me take that for a couple of minutes. So I've been doing rideshare, like I said, for 7 years now. The trend has not been the driver's friend for the last 7 years. I mean, personally speaking, I've been through 5 rate cuts, and this last thing that they brought upon us, maybe the 6th one. We're still trying to figure it out if it is a rate cut or not. But if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. So to me, the drivers are in a squeeze. I mean, I call it the winter for rideshare. Macroeconomic conditions are hurting the drivers quite a bit, and it's helping the companies quite a bit. So whatever is hurting the drivers is helping Uber and Lyft, just for the fact that people's W-2 incomes are not enough. There are a lot of drivers out there driving, and it's the same size pie, and my sliver of the pie is getting thinner and thinner, but also you're getting the fare cuts as well. So, I mean, one of the reasons we're really having success on Show Me the Money Club is because we just don't talk about constantly being negative, right? You could be negative,
Right.
negative sells, but then you have to understand that millions and millions, tens of millions of people are involved in this new world called the gig economy, and rideshare is a major part of it, obviously. And we just need to inform and educate people, and then have them make up their own mind if they want to do rideshare, they want to do deliveries, they want to do food delivery, whatever it is. But to me, it hasn't been. I don't think it's going to be. Without being too pessimistic, I don't think it's going to be a good winter for drivers, rideshare drivers. The demand seems like it's also slacking a little bit, but also there is a lot of drivers. This is the most oversaturated market I've seen. I'm in LA, California. I've only driven in LA, California. I know the glory days. I call it, I wrote an article called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. We're in the ugly period at the moment, and there's way too many drivers out there. And I don't blame the drivers. They got to do what they got to do to put food on the table. So, it's going to be difficult, but, we've been through these storms before, and I think this one will pass as well. But in the meantime, we just need to stick together. I think that's what we need to do as drivers, and try to figure out how to make the most amount of money in the shortest period of time.
Yeah, I want to add that not only are you guys not negative? I think you guys are just. I mean, Sergio, you've jumped on live streams with me a bunch. Like, you're not negative. You're just, and you're not being a realist and too harsh. It's just, these are things that are better to talk about before they jump out and happen. So even if, like, you guys say, hey, this looks like it might happen, and people get prepared for something bad, and then it's not as bad, hey,
Yeah.
that's a lot better a scenario to be in than just have the rug yanked out from under you.
Yeah. I mean, being preemptive, right? And because if I was not a driver, I wouldn't understand these things.
Right.
And, I read a lot of articles about the rideshare or the gig world. Honestly, 90%, 95% of what I read is nonsense, because it's all cut and paste, and, it's written by journalists who don't drive. If you don't drive, you can't feel it. You can't feel a rate cut. You have to actually drive to do trips and go, oh, this math does not add up. This looks like a rate cut, right? So
Yeah.
to me, I think that's why we're having a success, because both of us are drivers, and viewers are mostly rideshare drivers, and they're not stupid. I mean, Uber and Lyft thinks the rideshare drivers are stupid. We're not. What we are, we have a lot of educated people in our community, and to me, is just call it the way I see it, and Chris as well, and we go from there. You don't have to like it. There's many other channels, but I think people are gravitating towards people who they can relate to, which is another couple of drivers who are actually doing this actively and feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah. And not holding back and putting on a fake facade or a fake face. You guys are just living through it, and you're letting them live through it with you. That's the kind of stuff I like, just the organic. Let's talk. Chris, what would you add to what is there anything you would add to what Sergio said or change or in your perspective?
Yeah, I'll put in my perspective. Like I said, I've been driving since 2015, October, and that was starting in Charlotte. And this was during the 80-20 split. So for those who know the 80-20 split, this was, right at the beginning all the way through until they went to the 75-25 and then to the time and distance rates, with the upfront pay for passengers, when they decoupled everything. But going back to that time frame, when I was driving, I'm like, this is bonkers money. That's how much I was making at that.
Right.
And then, slowly progress, you have to start implementing different strategies, and you have to know where and when, and all these different factors are going to result in how much you're actually going to earn or how much you potentially could earn. On top of, these systems are getting smarter, so the algorithms are getting smarter. They're able to pinpoint so much more accurately in so much quicker of a time. And again, as Sergio has mentioned, there's so much macroeconomics going on with inflation, with layoffs, with all of these things that are happening. More drivers are coming on the road. But the whole perception too is, people are thinking, oh, the gig economy is the best to get into for this time and weather the storm. But sometimes that's not necessarily true. And when you have such an influx of new people coming on board who may not know what's going on, who may not understand, and are just signing up and going on, yeah, you're going to have people who are going to come on, they're going to make some money, they're going to be happy, but you're going to have other people coming on, they're going to be like, what's going on here? I'm not making any money. So that's going to help flush out some of these people that aren't being smart about it and keep some people on. So I think we're going to see, yes, a bad winter when it comes to it, going on for a little bit of time. As more layoffs come, as more inflation could possibly come down the road, you might see that more and more. But I think that it's just a time where we really have to look at strategies. We really have to pay attention to what we're doing in order to continue making money. And yeah, we're probably going to feel it a little bit more so. You want to plan for the bad times and enjoy the good times. We enjoyed the good times. Now it's time that we take care of the bad time. And hopefully everybody who's going to make it on the other end will actually enjoy and, have another boost of goodness, you could say, when it comes to going out there, making money, earning money. But yeah, strategy is key right now when it comes down to it.
Yeah, if I may add to something Chris said, I mean, exactly right. When I first started, I was making so much money. I go, this is embarrassing. I mean, why am I making so much money? It's like it's like 40-hour week would pay me $3,000 a week, and I was having fun doing it. But now you have to do 80 hours a week to do the same thing because of the rate cuts. But most importantly, what it is that, a lot of people think rideshare is an easy thing to do, right? You put the gas in the car, you get on these platforms, you get it, through a watered down background check, and boom, you're ready to turn the app on and you go, right? If you guys notice, most companies do not put any educational videos out there, meaning if you do this, maybe it's this, if you drive at these hours, whatever. Lately, they've been doing it, showing, flashing signs and colors and whatever on the maps. But initially, none of that was there. You had to just do it. So, and the learning curve, I mean, to do rideshare and to do it well, it's like a 6-month process. And people think, yeah, I'm just going to pick somebody up point A, take him to point B and drop him off and do it again. Well, those days are gone. Now you really, really, really have to pay attention to your P's and Q's, and you have to you have to know your city. Number one, all these new people that are coming around, overcrowding the marketplace, they have no clue. Half of them can't even read Google Maps. But to Uber's and Lyft's benefit, though, right? Because now they have all the drivers that they need. Now, all this.
Do they right now though? That's another question.
They're what?
I was asking, do they right now though? I feel like I've been seeing a couple things about a little bit of slowing of onboarding.
Slowing and all. Well, that's because
it's not markets are still very oversaturated. Don't get me wrong. However,
extremely oversaturated. I mean, Steve, I take screenshots when I drive, and we're going to show a bunch of them tomorrow. Obviously, like I said, I'm a passenger as well. I open my passenger app and see who's around me, right? And then how many drivers are around me. And I live in the suburbs of LA. Every street corner, which never did, had 8 Ubers and 8 Lyft cars waiting for requests. And to me, that's exactly what it was maybe late 2018. is as bad, if not worse, than 2018.
For me, so
And
like
it's again,
anecdotally, I feel like I went from like 10, 12-minute wait to like 3 or 4-minute waits
yep,
again. And I sort of live
exactly
on
that.
the hill, and I've been sort of shocked. I'm like, there's people near me up on this hill.
Yep.
Like, within 2 minutes. Like, what?
Yep. Yeah, both Uber and Lyft's pickup ETAs are down to 4 or 5 minutes now. They
And
have
then
so much
here's
benefit.
one thing too to note: onboarding new drivers is not the same thing of having drivers on the platform already. It's two separate things.
Right.
So you have
I'm
drivers
talking
who you
about
already
I'm
brought
talking
on.
about bringing new people on, and I know Sergio kind of hit on it with, there's. I mean, we saw, what was it last week? 1,300 or whatever people were laid off from Doordash, I think.
Yeah.
Employees, not drivers. You know, obviously, because we're independent contractors, but we're laid off there. So I mean, like, no job here. I've been saying this lately. No job is safe right now. Like, the people who are telling me I'm going back to W-2, I'm all, if those people want to, I'm all for it. However, I don't think that it's the safety net it once was. It's not like going back to W-2 is going to save you either. You just got to keep your wits about you and make good decisions.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, W-2 is not what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Everything has changed, right? And a lot of people gravitate to the gig economy because of the flexibility and the freedom aspect of it. But then that freedom and flexibility is becoming quite scarce now, just for the fact that, in the old days, if I turned my app on, because there was not an oversupply of drivers, I would get a request immediately wherever I was, whenever I was. And, the other thing that we do on the Show Me the Money Club is, we're going to do like a lot of educational stuff going forward, how to figure out your costs, what it takes to run your car, because everybody's car is different. And, I've talked to a lot of drivers since I started doing this. I send them like an email saying, what is your UR? And then they come back to me, what is UR? I go, it's your utilization rate. It's how long do you have out of the online hour a passenger in the back seat? If you're last time I checked, there was still 60 minutes in an hour. If you have 30 minutes of it with a passenger in the car, you have UR of utilization rate of 50%. And the funny thing is, for Uber, the utilization rate is completely different than what the drivers is going to be, right? For Uber, the most important thing is have enough density in a city at every street corner so that passengers like David or myself can get picked up in 3 to 4 minutes as opposed to 10 to 12, right? So they want as many drivers out there as possible. Well, that's good for Uber and Lyft, but that's not good for the driver, right? Because now I'm going to sit in the car. I remember last August when I was driving, I literally could not turn my app off fast enough to take a break because it was request after request, and my utilization rate was about 97, 98%. Now my utilization rate is 52 to 55%. So irregardless of how much demand there is, I'm waiting more. The reason for that is there are 8 more drivers right in my vicinity, right? So the things are changing. And when Uber and Lyft comes and talks to you and says, oh yeah, to turn your app on and go make $37 an hour, it's not real, because if you take my utilization rate of 50%, actually I'm only making $18 an hour, right? I'm not making 37. So overall, I think compared to W-2, I think it's still a valid, gig economy is a valid competitor to the W-2 job today. I wouldn't have said that maybe 15, 20 years ago, because W-2 came with a lot more benefits, a lot more sustainability. Now W-2 is like, what is that, 18,
And
20 an hour?
and don't forget job security either.
Yeah, you don't have that.
No, nobody has that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very, very few. And even them, I'm not so sure of.
Yeah.
It's bad.
But I want to sort of give a shout out. I agree very much with the sort of utilization rate, because when I've worked at sort of Uber in ops, right, the stat that we always track the most for drivers is trips per hour, right, which is the Uber's version of sort of utilization rate. And I think that was sort of the rationale for all the price cuts, right, was the idea that, hey, you can cut the prices, but trips per hour was going up because you're unlocking demand with the price cut. But I feel like, to be honest, almost everyone who, if you look at the population of the US, most people have heard of Uber, right? I think this line when I worked at Uber was, despite the fact that this was a huge company, something like 12% of the population had even heard of Uber. That's just not the case anymore, right? So these price cuts hurt because there is just no more trips per hour to go up. So you have sort of the double whammy of sort of, there are not that many new people joining the platform, and you have more drivers, and you have a lower price cut. And I think that's really it's a tough
I mean,
rub.
David, you're correct on that. They've reached such scale now that I don't think their intent is to grow, right? Because they have 122 million monthly active users as of the last quarter. So, I mean, pretty much every adult that could be on Uber is as a passenger or an Uber Eats customer or DoorDash or whatever. So everybody's in the game, right? And you would think, since all 122 million are there, the demand is going to stay pretty constant, even, goes through some ebbs and flows. But the only constant is if the demand even stays constant, but you double the, or even the 50% rate increase the driver base, pie stayed the same. My sliver just became thinner. So to me, as a driver, utilization rate to me is very, 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 very important, right?
Yep.
And for Uber, it's quite the opposite. For Lyft, quite the opposite. For us, is I only get paid when I have a butt in the back seat.
Yeah.
That's the only time. So
I think that's really sort of why our philosophy at Para is like get as many opportunities as you can in one place, is exactly because that utilization rate is like you can't depend on one platform to fill that utilization rate. You got to that's the driver of money. You're completely right.
100%. Chris can talk about that a lot. He talks about it quite a bit. Is about multi-apping, right? You got to have choices, man.
Mhm.
You can't just be on
Yep.
Uber and say, "Oh, I'm going to make money." You're just not going to. Not these days.
Before jumping to multi-apping real quick, I want to ask David something. Because you're the only one of us that actually has operational experience within the walls and the confines of the castle of Uber. I'm curious. So the whole time the time you were there, since then, everything, it's always been, let's oversaturate markets. Let's just onboard everybody, bring them on. Why now? In your best guess, I know nobody knows, but in your best guess, why now would they be doing that same thing when all these states are moving towards these new regulatory payment methods, Massachusetts potentially being unionized on January 1st? I mean, why now keep oversaturating, like Sergio was saying, 8 cars within
I think
a
a couple
mile?
things. So I'd worked there sort of like 2015 to 17, and the philosophy back then was sort of two things, right? The best way to grow end user growth, right, which is sort of people calling the rides, was predicted by ETA, right? So the lower the ETA, the more people used Uber, the more people used Uber, the more trips drivers should go up, pay should go up over time. The second one was they found that was the fastest way to gain market share on Lyft, right? So people would open up the two apps, and whichever app said it was there the fastest, if the price was roughly the same, the ETA was what drove the choice between the two platforms, right? And I think, what you saw was that, that's the idea was, capture more and more of the market, more and more people start using it. And that happened. But I think you've hit that sort of point of saturation. So I think, why are they doing it now? I don't have the answer, but sort of two things. I think one, we have to believe that to some extent there still is the Lyft's market share is plateaued, if not going down in some of the places. Can we continue to use ETA to drive them into the ground? And I think sort of number two is these marketplace things, you sort of, when I was there, they would always say you sort of balance the market in 6-week segments. But essentially, to some extent, there was probably these huge onboarding pushes when the times were good 6 months ago, earlier at the beginning of the year, that are working their way through now, plus what's going on with the economy, right? So I guess not a simple answer there, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Well, I mean, it's the unintentional consequence of the economy, of the macro economy, right? I mean, Uber, this is the lowest costs that they had. I mean, I'm sure David can attest to that. When he was there, they were spending ridiculous amounts of money onboarding drivers and bonuses and sign-up bonuses and things like that. That does not exist today anymore because people are just voluntarily doing it because they need cash. And barriers to entry is so easy when it comes to being a driver, right?
Yeah.
And where can you make a couple $100 extra cash a week? Just a couple $100, but it adds to the driver supply.
Yeah.
It's Uber and Lyft or DoorDash or, Instacart or whatever it is. If your goal is making a couple $300 a week to make ends meet, this is the fastest way to do it.
When I was there, the city of LA, right, was spending $2 to $3 million a week on new driver bonuses and incentives for drivers. Just the city of LA.
Yeah.
Right. And I think to some extent, a lot of that was also driven with the price war with Lyft. So that was why so much money was being spent, basically. But think about that. That like the city of LA alone was spending.
There's only 80,000 drivers, 80 to 100,000 drivers in LA County. I mean, it's not that much, but you have to also understand the turnover rate, right? The burnout rate is intense. I mean, 70% quit in less than a year because they do it for a couple, 3 hours until in between jobs or whatever, because Uber sold it as put your side hustle on. That was their slogan, right? So a lot of people just do it for a few hours a week, make a couple $100, be happy. But it adds to the driver misery because in those ebbs and flows until the pandemic, I mean, they just kept onboarding new drivers, and they're doing it now because people actually, the first time I think in 12 years, their driver supply is totally sufficient to the demand. Totally is. And they're not spending a penny to do it these days because people are just doing it because they need it.
Fair enough. So I guess, I'm going to twist this in then, Chris, to you. Since you and I both know Kim, she's a multi-apping queen. And we all know Kim, but she's a multi-apping queen. I love Kim. So the crazy quests, the games, the jump through this hoop, let's do this, let's have epic adventures, let's go off a mountain, let's parachute. I mean, this and multi-apping and upfront pricing, radar. I mean, what has gone on, and are we better off now at the upfront model? Because I think we talked about this a little bit when David and I were on your show, that like, why is the upfront model here 14 years late?
Okay, so I guess we could start first with the games. I think originally, if you go back again to the 80-20, 75-25 split, that was where the driver made X amount and then Uber made the remaining amount. Then when they switched over to the mile and distance time and pay for that, then you started seeing these quest promotions and these bonuses and all that start popping up. And because Uber and Lyft were still the main 2 gig platforms out there, and you started having food delivery come on board, but not as quickly, I think that's just kind of one of those things where it continued on, where you're seeing these bonuses and these quests and these promotions and all these different things going on to try to gamify the system to get drivers to go on at a specific time, at a specific place, pretty much to either spread them out or to take care of business, to have enough drivers on when the demand is coming on board. So let's say DoorDash, you want so many drivers between 4 and 9 p.m. on a Friday, because that's when the majority of orders are coming in. So you want to make sure time is also met with the supply where it equals the demand. So I think that's kind of it. And then as these algorithms, as these companies get smarter and smarter, they're able to kind of finesse that and, do all these different tests. David, I don't know how many tests you may know that Uber was running at one point or Lyft is running at one point, but they're testing all the time in different markets. So one market might see something, a couple of drivers might see something to see if that test is going to be accurate or not. And I think it's just a gamification, which Sergio and I have talked about. There was an article written recently too, where Sergio was part of that interview, and it started with that. And I think that is what drives people on. And then it kind of takes away that whole aspect of freedom and flexibility, because it's pretty much them telling you, hey, this is when you can go on, this is when you can make money. But when you start stacking it, when you kind of use it against them, that's when you can start making more money. And it's just the game that you have to play in order to play their game as well too. So there's a few things there. Yeah, sometimes you got to play the game in order to make ends meet or to make it out. But there's a way where you can game out and try to take advantage of them as best as you can. And that's going to take a lot of thought, a lot of planning, and just kind of scheduling yourself, your time, your area, to make sure what works best for you, what works best for your area, and all these different things come together. So then that way, yeah, you can try to potentially make the most you can.
Now the biggest part of that is moving into upfront pricing. I would like to know what your guy. I mean, I've heard you guys talk about. I've heard you guys talk about this probably every episode, at least to some degree. And I know it seems like something that we should, all four of us should be able to just look at for an hour and understand it. Like, it's not a lot of numbers, it's not a lot of stuff, but yet I've heard you guys talking around this, and it all makes sense. But what's the overall take? Because I'm going to be honest with you guys, just putting it out there that this could have been done years ago. We've all been asking, veteran drivers have all been asking for this forever. Just show us everything. If I don't like it, I won't take it. I mean, I think that you guys probably, Sergio, I don't know how much it was in your market, but Chris, I know the markets you're talking about were probably like mine in Denver. There was a time when your acceptance rating was a threat to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, truly, even though it shouldn't have been, it was. And if you dipped under, 80, you were done.
Yeah.
I mean, that they used to actually do that. Acceptance rating no longer mattering. That's huge. But is the upfront, after all the research you guys have been doing, is the upfront model looking good, fair, decent?
No, I mean, I think upfront is another rate cut, a small one, albeit, but I think it's a rate cut. But I think Uber is looking at this as, well, after 12 years, we're showing the driver the destination, so it's kind of an exchange, right? Well, you get paid less because now you see the destination of the passenger, because it comes together as a package. And to me, it shouldn't be that way, obviously. And this upfront, we talked about it the last 2 weeks with many, many drivers around the country, that it shouldn't be coming with any restrictions, but it is. So they're getting logged out for hours at a time. Now, Uber says it's a glitch. I don't think there are any glitches in the Uber world. I think most of everything is intentional. To me, if I can decline 20 trips in a row and I can be online, but this guy in Texas declines 3 and he gets logged out, literally out of the system for 3 hours, right? What kind of independent contractor does that make me? But going back to real quickly to the gamification, look, I mean, Uber honestly thinks that most people are ignorant of the fact that this carrot and stick game that they play with the colorful surge maps and bells and whistles, this truly is like a casino. And I know this, and David can maybe agree or not, but Uber hires hundreds of social workers and psychiatrists to design all these programs, because every time you hear an Uber ping, it truly does release some sort of chemical in your brain. It does. Like, to me, I've been with the platform for 7 years. Every time I hear the ping, something happens to me. I get like a little adrenaline rush. It's like, if I feel like, there's an opportunity here. I'm like a dog that's about to get a bone, right?
There's a special place in the afterlife for those people.
Yeah. Well, those people, they're probably going to go in there, and they're not going to like to see me up there. That's what it is. But to me, it's like upfront is going to be a rate cut ultimately, to be proven to be a rate cut. They called it rebalancing. I think it's rebalancing towards them more than anything else, without giving up much, because we're going to talk about it tomorrow. But it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be an exchange. It shouldn't be exchanged for something that an independent contractor should have had for 10 years anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering, and I know we touched on it a little bit before, and David, please weigh in here. Like, that's why I was wondering if all these years, I mean, because obviously they have, but have they gained that algorithmic advantage that they want to now go, you know what, we got you. We figured this out.
100%.
Well, I would joke. I remember that they've even gamed a lot of the job I used to do out of existence, right? So what had happened was, you used to have a lot of operations managers on the ground, and I would set all the parameters every week, right? So we're going to offer this sort of incentive. We're going to test a bunch of these different sort of things. And then we would feed all the data back to HQ, right? And then HQ started getting smart. They're like, we actually need to coordinate across all the cities in a better way. So they started something called Uber Labs. and their job was, I forget, it was labs, but something like that. And their job was basically to coordinate the tests across the cities. So they were the layer that sat there being like, these 30 cities are going to run a version of this. These 30 cities are going to run a version of this. We're going to look at basically the results of all of these. And by the time I was leaving, they'd built almost like this machine. And what the machine would do is you tell it in the market, this is what I want to accomplish for the week. And the machine would go and create the tests. It would go deploy it to drivers. It would go measure its own results. It would read all the prior historical results and then teach itself and then go pay people. So it reached a point when I was leaving from where at first I used to have to go manually upload Excel sheets every day to design the experiments to I would just tell the machine what I wanted it to do. Basically, so over the course of, I wasn't even there for 2 years, right? But in the course of just under 2 years I was there, it went from, it took 4 or 5 years worth of data, but very quickly this machine took it over, right? Just fed with years and years and years of data. And it's run across every single market in every single city, right? And cut across all types of information you could imagine.
And the baby of that machine now is Upfront Pricing.
Yeah, sort of the ops. I always joke that we built a machine. We built a machine that put a lot of the line ops people out of a job. Not really, because there's other stuff to do, but essentially that part of the work got automated away.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am not going complete Will Smith AI here, but I I happen to think that we're moving way too quick in technology, and by that I don't mean like we shouldn't be trying to figure things out, but I feel like by what I mean by moving too quick is I think that we're like, okay, that's done, and we move on, and yet it's like, whoa, can we make that right first? It's horrible.
Yeah,
but I think why not upfront, right? I think it goes to the same reason that we like, I at least have that problem with the tip transparency with DoorDash, right? Is it's the same thing. Is it's easy, like they're trying to balance a market across, even in a city, multiple geographies, right? And by not showing up front, it makes it easier to balance this geography that's having a harder time than that geography, etc. And it's the same reason for the tip transparency in DoorDash, right? They don't show it for everyone because they want to make it easier to fulfill the trip nobody wants to take. And I really think it's just sort of the wrong thinking, right? I understand the rationale as to why it's an efficient way to help balance the market. But viewing it from the other lens, it's drivers are independent contractors, so this is not right, and they should know what they're going to be paid ahead of time and have the information. The rationale or the reason doesn't really matter, right? But I think that's why it's taken up until this point, is just, it's more convenient not to.
Yeah, and to add to that, Uber and Lyft are not bound to any type of rate. So there's no time distance. There's no, time pay. There's no distance pay. There's nothing like that. So they're not bound. They could, they could finagle what they want to pay, and they're saying it's more transparent because the pickup, the drop off, how much you're going to earn, but you don't know how they're coming up with that figure. So they could say, oh, we're going to kind of keep it around the same rates, but what's going to happen next week? What's going to happen 3 months from now, 6 months, 2 years from now? What's it going to look like? All of that is still in the unknown. So they're not bound to any figures. They can just kind of go back and forth wherever they want and then balance. Okay, well, drivers are going to accept this. They're not going to accept this. We can't go lower than this rate. And they're harvesting all of that data on top of it. So they can really pinpoint where drivers are going to say no and where drivers are going to say yes. And I think that's part of what they're doing. So they're just accumulating the billions and billions of trips that they've had, the data points that they've had, the driver data points, all of these different things. I think they're just, combining into one system and trying to finesse it back and forth. It's sort of like nickel and diming drivers.
Like with that, there's this is sort of the wonky way of putting it, is like the only way to push back on a market force enabled, tech force enabled marketplace is through market forces. Or in the simplest way is if they're seeing what you do or don't take, the easiest way to affect the system is not to take it. I think the issue is, up until this point, what a lot of people have said equals this should be a strike. This means we should turn off the app. The problem is coordinating and asking people to not make money is hard. And I guess maybe that's why, to some extent, where the philosophy underlying a lot of what we're doing at Para, and where I think a lot of us agree in terms of that utilization rate, really comes in, right? It's hard to ask people to say no, But the way to get people to stop taking trips and to get that market force back is to have other good trips for the time, right? I think is really where it goes to. Is like the best way to push on an algorithm like that is if giving people alternatives such that they say no, right? So forget the wonky part of it. It's basically just like that's the way that pricing goes up is if enough people say no to trips. And I think the only way to do that is more opportunities.
But that's David. That's the discriminatory aspect of these algorithms, right? I mean, you have a two-sided marketplace when you talk about rideshare. You have the passenger, you have the driver, and you have Uber in the middle, right? So to me, the algos are set up to be discriminatory for the driver and the passenger. Meaning, in fact, I spoke to our friend Len Sherman for an hour today because Chris, you watched the video, the one we did with all the trips that he goes, how come you only would have taken 1 out of 26 that Uber threw you? I go, because that's what I'm worth. That's what I'm going to do, right? So we were talking about it for over an hour today. He's a business professor at Columbia Business School, and the guy is teaching there. He's no dummy. And he goes, and he said this to me a long time ago. He says, this is no rocket science, right? He goes, you have to charge as much as you can on one side, and you have to be able to pay as little as possible on the other side. And that's the only way you're going to make money. And this upfront that they have brought up finally, and I think, and he's a huge believer that Uber, more than any other gig company, is a massive, massive data bank. And they live on data, they flourish on data, they analyze data every second of every day globally. And just like David said, the machine is learning, constantly learning how to squeeze more out of the passenger and how to squeeze more out of the driver. And the driver is easy. I mean, you cut rates or you lower incentives or whatever it is. But on the passenger side, especially, everybody has tendencies, and the machine is learning what bars you go to, what restaurants you go to, what time do you go to work, what airlines you fly, what hotels you stay at, and they're gearing pricing to the passenger according to their habits.
Where are you traveling? Are you going to this market that's blue collar? Are you going to this that's even lesser blue collar? Are you going where do you go when you go out? What can you afford? I mean,
when you talk about sort of those incentives with drivers, I mean, this was back in 2017 when I was there, right? We called it like Wiggles, right? It was called Wiggles for users, but we were testing on an individual level what your price sensitivity was, right? So there was an individual model.
Did you really do that? Because David, that was my biggest, that was my, it's not a concern, obviously, because Uber is Uber, you got to do what you got to do. But I always thought that every passenger and every driver has a tiny little sliver in an AWS server, and Uber spits pricing out to the passenger according to their tendencies, and Uber also spits out pricing to the driver according to their tendencies. If you're
I don't know the AWS bucket, but when I was like the last couple of months I was there, that was the big push, is when they decoupled rider and driver pay. We introduced the rider wiggle, which meant not only would Steve and I get different prices going from the same place to the same place, but even David, over the course of months, they would figure out exactly what my price point was, right? So that like individual price sensitivities, and this is in 2017, and the world's gotten a lot smarter since then, right? So I can't imagine what they have now.
But David, if we were equal,
I'm talking about too, on the driver's side, is that they can price driver A and driver B who are sitting right next to each other, get a ping request coming in. They can price it completely different based on the factors of driver A and driver B.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, let's talk just pretending on zip codes here for a minute. So you're in San Francisco. Let's say that you're downtown and I am in South San Francisco, and we're equidistant from the airport. I mean, do you think that that kind of thing's going on? Like my zip code, we'll pay him this. I mean, I know they're different rides. It's kind of a hard comparison, but
I think they wouldn't do it on Zip directly because that would open a whole other can of worms, probably. But they would argue that they're doing it on, they'd argue they're doing it on Steve as the individual.
Sure, but
yeah.
I did this test the other day with the Wall Street Journal reporter, and she was, we were talking about a subject, and then I said, "Want to turn your passenger app on?" It's Pretty Karana with the Wall Street Journal, and I said, "Turn your app on." I go, "Well, are you at the office?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Go ahead and order a trip to your house." And she ordered one trip on her account, and it said $16, whatever it is. And then I said, "Now switch your credit card and order another trip." and she switched her credit card or a little bit, it popped her $26. Same trip, same distance, same time, within 30 seconds. So Uber is paying so much attention to all this information. And you know, to me, I think if you're in an underprivileged community, the pricing of the trips is definitely going to be done differently for you than if you were living in Beverly Hills. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely no doubt about that. Or early morning, you know, for the passenger side, right? That's one thing that I want to do badly, but then it's very difficult to get to the passenger because passenger loves the convenience. If the passenger knew what kind of games they're playing with, because as drivers, we know what kind of games we're getting played. But as a passenger, you can spread the word saying that this is what you're doing, what they're doing to you. I mean, do you really want to play this game, right? Because ultimately, both companies are going to do the same thing. They're going to come pick you up, drive you to somewhere, drop you off. That's it. It's not a big deal. Why pay more? But people just don't understand that if I live in Beverly Hills, I should be charged for the same distance and duration for the same trip as somebody else would get charged a lot less. Why should it be that way? Just because I'm rich? It shouldn't be that way. Because the transportation service,
like where it goes to, right? Because I think at the time we weren't thinking about it as nefarious, right? There really was, at least part of the org I was in, right, was this idea like, hey, like, you know, you would be able to subsidize trips that might not make as much sense with people who won't feel the difference on a buck or two, right? But the problem is with that technology, it depends on what you want to optimize for, right? So you can use that and say, hey, I want to optimize to subsidize the trips in this, or you can say, I want to optimize to make Uber the most money.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it really is sort of what are you using it for?
Yeah. I mean, I think discriminatory, you know, the algos are supposed to be discriminatory and they're doing a great job. And I think they have finally perfected it. And otherwise we wouldn't have upfront pricing and they wouldn't have released. They wouldn't have released.
I have a question about upfront pricing. Is it everywhere for everyone? I think that's the part that's always a little confusing, is that it seems like it's most places for most people, but not always. But
yeah, it's on all major cities.
All major it's even in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had it in August. We had it before Sergio did.
Yeah, I only had upfront for 5 weeks. I mean, I had a version of upfront with restrictions because of Prop 22. But,
I remember that on one of your shows, you were doubting somebody about Lyft.
Yeah.
And then you turned your app on and there it was.
Exactly. You're right. Exactly. Yeah, that we got upfront. Yeah. No, we got
that the same day.
I mean, upfront is a good thing. I cannot say anything bad about it because I know where I'm going. Okay, finally, I know where I'm going.
Yep.
The only bad thing about it is I think if it comes with a cut, you know, everybody has to decide on their own what kind of cut they're gonna, you know, if it's okay to cut or not to cut. But according to both CEOs, which we interviewed, and one president, one CEO, they both said, if you don't accept trips, it's on us. So I'm going to hold it. I'm going to hold them to it. I mean, I really am, because that's public information. You're on my channel saying during an interview that hundreds of thousands of people are going to watch or watched already, saying that if you don't accept trips, it's on us. Give us time for our algorithms to learn.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
If that's really the case.
I hope Doordash would do the same thing, right? Actually, that makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, but here's the thing, like, okay, so upfront pricing, like David, when you and I met, this is what we would have dreamed of. Like, this is what we wanted. If the next day after we met, they were like, well, we're going to do this, we'd have gone totally different path than we did, right? So if they're going to do this upfront, is it so much so that everybody's so stoked there's going to be some changes in this new year? This administration wants a lot of things. Unions want a lot of things. Do you think it's, and I don't know if I'm going to date some people's age here, but do you almost feel like, I almost feel like it's like New Coke. I don't know if you guys remember when they did New Coke. They like literally threw away the good Coke recipe.
Yeah.
And then recanned Pepsi.
Yeah.
They made it taste like Pepsi. And they're like New Coke. And then Coke Classic became you couldn't even get it for a while.
Yeah.
Only New Coke. And I feel like upfront pricing might be the New Coke. Like, it's here because it's transparent. And then after the new year and stuff, let's rip that out. And then what's next?
There's always something changing. Look, you know, we're blessed and lucky enough. I don't like politics or talking about politics, but, you know, in politics, everything is moving at all times. The bar is moving all the time. In rideshare, honestly, it's You know, I feel like a comedian that's, you know, like a Jay Leno that's going to make fun of this politician or the other one. In our world, there's always something happening on a daily basis. Honestly, if you just say Google Uber news, I mean, there's like 20 pieces of news happening at the same time every single day. So we're never going to be short on material. However, I think at the moment they're going to leave it as is, because when it comes to upfront and destination that comes as a package, if they took upfront the destination part of the package, honestly, I think that'll be the hugest mistake they will ever make. Because at the moment, look, they're taking advantage of what they're being presented with because of the macroeconomic conditions. Okay, that will pass. You know, we know economy goes bad, economy goes good. But once you give that to people, which is, you know, top 20 markets of Uber is 90% of their revenue source, and they all have it without restrictions, supposedly. And if they start going backwards, and the only way they're going to do that, by the way, is if there is a driver shortage, because to Uber, the most important thing is not the driver. We have to call it the way it is. The most important thing for Uber is how fast can I pick up Steve? How fast can I pick up Chris, David? How fast? Am I faster than Lyft? Because that's my competitor. And if I'm faster to pick them up, I'm okay with it. Although there are, you know, rides being declined right and left because they're being mispriced according to their CEOs. I'm okay with it because I have all this slack, all this additional supply that's willing to accept the garbage. Okay.
As long as what they, like you said, as long as what they were saying they follow through with.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but when that ends, when the driver supply goes away, right, and then we're at an equilibrium, and people continuously start declining trips, and passenger pickup ETAs go up to maybe back to what they used to be, you know, right after the pandemic because of the shortage, maybe 10, 12, 14 minutes, then they will take it away. They will go, screw this. I'm not going to show this guy where he's going. He's only accepting 1 out of 20 that I'm sending him. And, you know, so
start maybe going back to like, hey, you got to take, you didn't take 8 of 10. Now you got to take 10 of 10, and then you'll get back your, I mean, I think we all see that coming.
That genie's hard to put back in the bottle.
Yeah, I think so.
Hope,
yeah,
right?
I think so.
But how many times have they given out something and then taken away? Look at Lyft Stay Within Area. Amazing feature. Amazing. Yeah. Like you can set the radius of where you want to be. When they first brought it out, unlimited time. Now they're putting a time on it. Area preference from Uber. They were rolling that out in certain markets. Now it's an Uber Pro reward for certain drivers. If you don't get it, I think it's Platinum and Diamond. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's both or anything more. But they're putting, they give you stuff, then they take it away and put on restrictions. So why not? The only thing is, I think that their pricing structure can go up and down, and I think that's going to kind of just be how much data they can collect and how much they can figure out and make either a personal driver profile or an area profile or whatever it might be in order to balance everything. So I think that we're probably going to have upfront earnings stay here. And I think we're going to probably not really have it tied to acceptance rate or anything like that. I think that what they're just going to end up doing is just bobble. I think you said wiggle. I think we're going to have a driver wiggle where they're going to go up with the pricing, down with the pricing, and they're just going to kind of go back and forth because, again, they're not tied to some sort of pay model structure like time and distance. They're not tied to that. So they could, if they want to raise it $1 for each ride, they could. If they want to take it away, they could. They're not bound to anything. So yeah, I think that's going to be a lot in the background.
Yeah, exactly true. I mean, we did the Uber Math 101 on one of the shows. Look, Uber did 2 billion trips last quarter, literally 2 billion individual trips, not dollars worth, individual trips. Right. They squeezed all that into their quarter, right? And with this upfront pricing, all they have to do is make it like a nickel or a dime at a time in each trip. That's $200 million every quarter. That's going directly to their bottom line. This is pure profit for them. It's not revenue. All they have to do is take 10 pennies from a driver and maybe charge 10 more pennies to the passenger. Nobody will feel it. And to them, though, because of the scale that they have, and it's massive amounts of money. It's billions of dollars. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. And they're going to slowly ratchet numbers and nickel less, dime less. Who's going to pay attention other than Serge? Well, most drivers don't
Yep.
even know what's going on, right? So I'm like, I mean, that's what their goal is, and I think they're going to achieve it.
Well, if they watch
and
Show Me the
it also
Money
goes
Club,
to the
they know.
analogy
But
where
It's not going to fly by me. I know that, and not Chris. But we have
well,
certain amount of reach, man. It's not easy to explain this to all people, and we're going to keep trying.
no,
Obviously,
but people, I've you guys are doing the show. I'm sitting on the other side of the wall in chat usually, and I'm watching, and I see people come into one live, and then I see them in the next one or the next one, and I see them staying longer. So I feel like they're like they take in a little bit, like we all did in the beginning, and then their head hurts.
Yeah.
And then they leave, and they're like, "I'll come back next week because that was a lot."
Yeah.
And
They're
I
already
feel like
used to it.
they are starting to get smarter, though. The real drivers are
Mhm.
starting to want to know more.
Yeah,
Well-
and the one thing though that I kind of fear when it comes to these companies and the data that they're collecting is the conditioning that they're going to start doing if they're not already doing that. I mean, we have the conditioning when it comes to the gamification of all of these promos and quests and bonuses and that. But what about the conditioning of a driver to take a rate at a specific point, let's say $5 for the ride, then in a week or two it's $4.95 for the same ride, and then 3 months from now, as they're slowly bringing it down, they're reconditioning drivers to accept less and less for the same that they would have taken today, let's say. So that's the one thing that I fear the most when it comes to these upfront, because again, they're not tied to anything and they can pretty much base it off anything. But the thing is, if you go too low, you're definitely not going to get anything. But if you do it incremental and you do it smart, and it's like boiling, is Sergio with his analogy talking about taking the frog and putting it into boiling water, it's going to jump out right away. But if you put it into warm water and then heat it up over time, it'll cook itself to death. So that's the biggest thing that I fear when it comes to these companies, how their pricing structure is happening when it comes to drivers, and then adding trip radar onto that, that whole game there. I don't like what I'm seeing. I like the upfront. I don't like what I'm seeing behind it. And I don't know if enough people are looking at the back end of those things.
Yeah.
Because I know the conversation we've had a lot, Steve, right? It's like, if people are upfront and if there's full transparency, is that enough? Has that made the gig economy better? Right. And I think where I go to is like, that is when we poll sort of the people, sort of the drivers' right movement and all that, like the number one response is actually transparency. I'm always surprised by that. I think number one's transparency. I want more transparency. Number two is actually, I want to make a living wage. Number three is, I need more trips to be able to get that living wage. And then sort of number four is, I want to drive safer on the road and stuff like that. But that's sort of really where I go to is, I loved the sort of keep me in this radius. I liked those sort of features from Uber and Lyft. And it's a little disappointing to see that they're sort of hiding that. They've basically done the calculus and said, hey, unless you're a driver worth this much to us, there's a net benefit or cost to us of doing this. And unless you far exceed that cost, we're just not going to give that to you. And that's frustrating to me. I think a little bit of a sneak peek is, I'd heard that a couple of weeks ago. So I know we have this new auto decline feature on Para, but actually we are in the process right now of building the keep me in a radius or filter out restaurants with a name, like, or with anything that contains, you can say, hey, I don't want Taco Bell, hey, keep me in 5 miles, and all of that. So I think to some extent we're going to try and backfill that and say, hey, we, if they're going to get rid of it, we'll just bring it right back.
So while we're wrapping this up, we have to touch on the personal dispatch system. I don't even care if it's just for a quick minute here. David and I have been talking about this for a long time. I just want to pick everybody's brain and get an idea or two off this thought, because I think this is what I really believe in, what David is talking about here. And I think this is the future. I think the future is, and it kind of aligns with you being in control of yourself as much as you can.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm going to just say 30 seconds. That's the gig economy 2.0. Okay. To me, when I first started, I had just Uber. Then I added Lyft. And then years later, I added, all the other ones. I have Amazon Flex and, all the ones that I have to test and see. Right. The most important thing to me, right, is to have more choices. And the transparency part is important to me. Making money is important to me, obviously. But if there is a way of me taking my personal package as a driver or as a gig worker and hop on different, islands, as I call it. Let it be DoorDash today, let it be Uber Eats for 2 hours tomorrow, let it be, Lyft the next day or whatever, if there's a system that can make my life easier by saying, hey, Serge, I'm your new dispatcher. This is where you're going for the next 2 hours, and this is where you're going to go for the next 2 hours, and this is where you're going to go for the next 2 hours. And you're all of your 6 hours instead of watching YouTube in your car or Netflix. You're busy. You make your money, a decent living, and move on. That would be like the ultimate dream of gig worker as a gig worker that I am. So I think you guys are on totally the right path, because people want to make money and move on. That's it. Let's not make this complicated. It's just simple as that.
And I think the key thing there is, I think, not even just like, I think you look at like what would help drive that. I think it's less of a, hey, go work Uber for 2 hours here and go work DoorDash for 4 hours there later. Any pro driver knows that right now, right? I think sort of the way to do it is you need more options.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and also you don't want to lose the flex.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, I
part
love the
of that is we don't want to all be in Amazon Flex blocks for every app and trying to.
David and I think you, Steve, are on the right path for the fact that every gig worker. I mean, this is a reality. Uber and Lyft were the only two things that people would talk about before the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Literally, I mean, that was it. There were, there was DoorDash, there was Uber Eats, there was all these Grubhub, whatever.
And let's be honest, Grubhub was the most successful pre-pandemic because they put people on wait lists. They said don't oversaturate.
Exactly. So to me, now there's an app for everything. And if I can take myself as a gig worker, there's literally an app for everything. Seriously, if I can take myself, and I look at like I'm a hummingbird. I go here, I go here, I go there, I go here. And I'm like, I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with my own personal ROI for my time, because it's time. I'm out there. I'm trying to, I'm not there to do anything but make money and go home safe. And you guys, if you can facilitate more choices, yes, there is maybe an oversaturation of apps these days, but there's no such thing in my mind. I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, to me, it's like, an average, like David, you said that on our show, right? What is it 4.6 apps now per driver or per gig worker?
Yeah, I mean, in our days it's like 3 point something, but that's
3 point something. Well, we want to get that to 9.8.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I always I like how you said sort of like a hummingbird. The way I've always viewed is like you should be your own key, and you should be able to unlock opportunities because of your work history, and you should be able to just skip all the onboarding, right? Because frankly, if you, Sergio, and I were applying to a delivery or a rideshare company, frankly, you should be pre-approved and I shouldn't, right? It makes sense.
100%.
So, Chris, if when you hear personal dispatch system, and I mean it's not even done yet. It's an idea. What is the first thing you would think of that you would want in that? Or what is something you can even think outside the box, something to add? We're just trying to take ideas down here.
For me, I think it's great to be able to hook up all these different apps, having it in one location and then setting up the parameters for the apps. So then that way you can try to get your utilization rate as high as 100% or close to it. Just because the more time you are driving someone around, you're moving a package, you're delivering food, whatever it is, that's when you're making money. It's not sitting there waiting. So if you have the ability to as Sergio, 9.8, if you could have 10 apps that you can pretty much go on or be saying, hey, I'm willing to accept it if these parameters are met. And that could change day to day. That could change time to time. Maybe you need to stay close to home because of whatever reason. Maybe you need to actually be at a specific location by a certain time. And so you don't want to go too far away. You don't want to risk that. But still keeping the ability when you turn something on, right away, you're able to get something. That dispatcher is saying, hey, we got something here. Would you like to take it? Meet your parameters. Let's go. And then, once you wrap that up or finishing that up, you get your next thing. So you get your queue going. And then that way you can pretty much go right when you sign on to when you're ready to get off, taking the trips, taking the rides, taking whatever you want in your own parameters, and then having that system meet you and keeping your independence, your flexibility, your freedom. And then these apps maybe have to compete with that. And competition is a good thing. So if they got to compete for you, that's flipping it a little bit. So if that's the possibility or the projection, that would be awesome. You know,
Yeah, I
one of
think
the things,
100%.
hmm?
I know. I agree with you
Oh,
100%. 100%.
yeah, and then I think it's Lending Tree or something. You get like 4 different banks that'll compete for your business, basically. So they're trying to compete with each other, but that's the whole thing. Like if we could flip it where they're trying to compete for your business or your, I guess, your ability to drive or to ride or whatever it might be, then maybe they're going to price it better, and that's going to create a competition as well too, which is going to help, you know, the gig worker. I look at it and say, how can we improve for the gig worker? How can we improve for the platform? Because we need these platforms in order to connect people, and then also for the customer to make them happy. So it's not a win lose lose. It's not a lose win win. It's a win win win, and that's something I'd like to see, and that potentially could be if that's what I'm thinking about. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, yeah, no, and I like that. I'm sure David does too, because one thing I was thinking when you were saying that is like one of the things I would like, almost like a calendar integration. Like I'd like to integrate that I have my son's this at 4 p.m. in Park Hill, Denver. So I need to be there at 3:45. Don't screw around with me. I don't want any talk about it. Just make sure I'm there.
And that sounds sort of crazy, right? But we were talking about earlier about how there was this black box that lived on all the data that could deploy information, deploy incentives, read it and learn from it. Can you just harness a tiny percent of those smarts and basically say, hey, Steve needs to pick up his son from school at 4 p.m. So keep him in a 5-mile radius beforehand.
Right. Or get him back to it if you took him out of it.
That's a true flexibility, though, right? That's true flexibility right there, right? But today, I don't call it flexible, honestly. It's like, you know, you have to work when and where there is demand today, period.
And it's not rocket science, right? It's like all this technology exists. We just need to arm the individual worker with it, right? It's like, it's not rocket science.
I mean, I think David said that correctly on our show. He said something that, you know, hit me the other day when I had a Zoom with him. He said, you know, you don't work for the gig economy, make the gig economy work for you, right? That's the thing. You know, that's I think the most important thing to me. That we all work in the gig economy, but we're working, you know, with this app, with that app. But then, you know, if there was a package presented to a lot of gig workers in a form that makes them truly flexible, and with all these little nuances that I think are very important to people, because if I have to pick up my son at 3:45, I have to stop what I'm doing at 3:30. None of these things exist today. None of it exists, and maybe that is the gig economy 2.0. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, not only that too, for a lot of people, if they're not multi-apping, the question is it sustainable for you as a driver or delivery driver? Some of these apps, I'm going to say no, it's not sustainable for particular drivers, depending on their area or whatever it might be. So you have to bring in multiple apps in order to continue that, especially with the oversaturation of markets, especially with you know, rate cuts happening, games that they're playing, you know, conditions that they're putting on. If you can take that away and, you know, you can say, hey, I'm going to be the jack of all trades, master of none, then that means, hey, I'm happy with, you know, as long as I can tell you exactly what I want or where I want to go, what I want to do, and then you fulfill that and you just kind of fill in those pieces, put that puzzle together for me, and then I just follow along for the ride. I'm great with that.
Yeah. David, I'm going to try and once a week bring you almost like a brain buster, because here's something I would want. And I don't even know if this is possible. Maybe all you guys will have something to say on this, but I'm starting to get to a point where, and I know Uber and Lyft, or at least Uber's Uber, so whatever, but to all these other gig companies in this personal dispatch system, in the dream, could there be a way to either have a singular company holding data and releasing it to the companies for what needs are approved or things of that nature, but then somehow get the drivers back a little bit of money for their data, since the data is being sold anyway. Could there be a company involved, or I don't even want to say company? Could there be something involved, a mechanism?
I feel like the control has to be in the hand of the individual driver, and you should know where that data is coming or going. I'm blanking on the name, but there is a company that is trying to do that right now, where they go and say, hey, we collect all, if you're a rideshare driver, you can opt in, we'll collect your information. The government wants to buy this information sometimes. And when the government buys the information, you'll get a cut of the money.
There's a dash cam company doing it too.
The problem is the government contract versus the number of drivers needed to buy in. It just ends up being everybody makes sense, basically. So it just doesn't really add up. But I could view a world in which that could make sense.
Data is becoming more and more valuable by the day, though.
It is.
Our data is more valuable than gold.
Yeah, I just think it shouldn't be in the hands of a company, right? It's like the data should be owned. And this is getting a little wonky, but I think one of the things we're trying to push for the DRM is like the companies argue that they own the data, right? And I'm not, I think from a legal perspective, we won't be able to argue that drivers own the data, but drivers should have an equal co-ownership in the data that you've created.
Yes.
Basically, right? And I think that is
something along. Yeah. See, that's why I was throwing it to you that way. I knew you'd spin it somehow. But you knew what I was saying, that somehow, like, dude, and it's not going to go down. It's going to get data is going to become worth more and more and more. Like, like these guys were talking about the advertising going on in the ride shares. They're doing that targeted on where you go. I mean, this is messed up stuff. So if they're going to do all this stuff, I feel like, we have to, you can't, the term live under the radar, that doesn't exist anymore. You can be in northern, Canada, and there is no off the radar. The radar is everything now. And I feel like data is just going to be it's worth so much to these companies. Why don't I get a piece?
I want to give a shout out to this guy too. It's called Driver Seat Cooperative. I think was trying to do this. I remember the name of the company.
Like you said, I understand that it shouldn't be a company, but I don't even mind if at the end of every episode you don't answer it and you wait till the next week and you just write it down and go, okay, I'm gonna have to go to the blackboard on this one.
Yeah. Well, the one takeaway, I know we're sort of at time here, but utilization rate is something I want to highlight more for people. So I'm going to go back to and actually they're going to be the one thing, if I had to take away something from this chat, is like, how can you highlight that for people? Yeah,
the people who show me, like DoorDashers especially. DoorDashers all the time show me, well, look, this is my week. And when they first show me that, the first thing I look at isn't their active time, it's their dash time. Like, how long were you on 80 hours and you dashed for 35? Because to me, that's still 80 hours of work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I
mean, or at least wasted time, but that's hours you could have put elsewhere and earned.
But that's again the programming of Uber and Lyft to the drivers. That's what they did, right? Because they put in, they sell you this dream of, active hours is this much, you can make this much. I'm not buying that. To me, I mean, I have a lot of different profitability matrix when I drive. I have 5 to be exact. And the toughest one is, to me, because I have a chance to grab a trip right in front of my doorstep of my house with my neighbor going to LAX or going to the airport, right? And I have a chance to earn money on my way back home. So to me, the most honest way drivers should look at it is when I leave my garage and when I return to my garage. That's it.
Right.
That's the toughest way, but that's the most honest way, right? And then you have all these online time, active time, this and that. Active time is meaningless to me, right? It's really meaningless. I can make $100
because I see people tell me that their earnings based on active time.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, that's, I mean, like, maybe we can talk about different ways of looking at this, but that's not one of them.
We're going to do that on Show Me the Money. Going next couple 3 weeks, we're going to have like education, because that's what we need to do. We need to explain it to you. You like it, you like it. You don't understand it, it's okay. We'll explain it to you again. But I think that's the most important thing. Education of the drivers has been missing from the first day on, and I think we need to fill that gap. I
would love to see a piece where you could basically just highlight with the charts, like utilization rate is probably the most,
It is
one
the
of
most
the largest
important.
drivers. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
the
And we're
best
gonna-
number for data for Uber and Lyft to, advertise saying, hey, if you work, 20 hours on active time, your average is $37 an hour. But if you're only active 20% of the hour, you just take 20% of $37 and that's what you're going to make. So it's it's something that they really have to get away from and, realize that active time is not what you need to. When I start my app, it's pretty much when I leave my driveway, and then I'll put a destination filter when I want to go back home, back on towards the house. And, once I get close to home, I'll shut it off. But, if I'm still going 5 minutes or more or something, that's the time that I say that I'm out on the road. So if I go out at 8 p.m. and I come back at 4:30 in the morning, if I'm, online, let's say about 99.9% of that. But if I'm only active for half of that, that's your pay that you're taking. If you want to look at it an hourly, that's only half the time. So,
Exactly.
Lastly, I mean, the gig economy is such a business that, a lot of people compare it, like foolish arguments. They say, oh, well, everybody travels to work 45 minutes each way. They're not getting paid for that. Well, guess what? In the gig economy, I actually have a chance to get paid for that because I could grab a trip and come home and getting paid at the same time I'm going into the city with, right? So don't compare your W-2 45 minutes stuck in traffic, because they go like, yeah, but, if you do that, I'm like, no, man. And that's the thing. You see, that's the Pollyanna stuff that Uber and Lyft make it look like, oh yeah, it's active time. Active time is meaningless, absolutely meaningless.
I agree.
But the drivers now have to help themselves and understand all these things. You have to know what it costs you to run a car for the hour or by the mile or whatever it is. Because honestly, if people figured this out, we wouldn't probably have this kind of an oversaturation problem. Because most of these people are not actually making money. They're actually maybe losing money after expenses. And to me, if I'm telling you you're losing money after expenses, you wouldn't go do that. You just go get a W-2 and then stand somewhere and make $20, which is the best way to do it for you, maybe.
I've been pushing really hard on our side to do like what I call like the net earnings. So when it pops up, it just takes, we know the car, we know the miles, we know all of that, and just show the net earnings for everything that comes through. But what I keep hearing from the users is please bring Doordash back. So we're focused on that instead. But, but on my end, sort of net earnings is something really on my mind, because I think it would just be great if we literally say, we can do all the math for you. This is exactly what this trip will pay you.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that would be, I think that would also open up what people are seeing. They think that they're getting, hey, I made $1,200 in 25 hours. Okay, well, what else? What did you spend in gas? What are you putting away for your car maintenance? What are you putting away for taxes? What are you doing for that? Like, how much did you actually make? You didn't really make that amount.
Maybe you
I
could
made
reverse engineer it to be, I have a Toyota RAV4
So that's exactly how
2012.
I had it put there. It's like people can set the thing, being like, this is the price of my insurance, this is the price of gas in my area.
This is my car, how many miles
car
are
I
on it, so
have.
that it could literally go, okay, well, you're going to need this done around here probably, and just really kind of show you need to be making this per hour.
So I hear that and utilization rate, and now the engineers are gonna hate that we had this podcast. So
I know they're
Well,
gonna,
hey,
but
man,
you know what? That's, but
I'm
we're
telling you.
disruptors. We're disruptors.
know
It's
what?
what we do.
But it's real though. It's real numbers, right? It's real, and people are just faking it. I mean, don't fake it. If you're making $20 an hour gross in any city that you're doing rideshare, trust me, people, you're losing money.
Yeah, be
And
honest
look,
with,
again,
and
okay,
be
you know
honest
what?
with yourself.
Yeah, just
Be honest with
because
yourself. It's
just
not, you're not doing
because-
anything wrong. It's just what it is.
No, absolutely not. But if you're doing that,
And then,
like,
and then if you're out 12 hours every single day and maybe take off a day, at that point I look at them, I'm like, why don't you have a job? You can actually make more money at your job working full time 40 hours versus sitting in your car 60 70 hours. You're going to be healthier, first off, because you're not sitting in your car so long. You're going to make more, you're going to be spending less, because every time you're in your car, you got all those different expenses. If you're slinging coffee or donuts or something, then there's no expenses there. You are just literally there making that company money and then getting paid for your time. So to me, it's like, you got to also have that foresight to see, is this still worth it for you to be in the gig economy, or to drive, or to do whatever you're doing, versus going and getting a job?
Yeah. Well, David, I mean, I think if you can create something like, I've been thinking about this, like, a simple tool that goes, because one of the major expenses is depreciation, which nobody understands how to do depreciation. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. But then, 98% of the drivers, I don't think understand it. So, the other day I was fooling around with it, and then I found this website, and you basically put your car in, your year, your model, how many hours you're driving, how many miles you have, all this. And then it literally like spits out a number at the bottom, and my eyes were like, holy crap, really? Is it that high? Depreciation is really that high? So if you take a full-time driver driving 6,000-7,000 miles a month, holy crap, man, that's a lot of miles, and your car is going to be worth nothing at the end of 2 years. So are you saving money to buy a new car, right? So if there was a tool that I put my model number, my year, how many miles I'm driving.
You'll forget, right? If you buy a car and it costs you like $12,000, just about $15,000.
Yeah, even any kind of car.
Yeah, right. It's like you call it a 5-year life, right? Which is pretty generous, right?
Yeah.
Like if you bought a used car and you're driving it that much, like that's $3,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's your $250 a month right there.
Yeah.
Honestly,
most people, I don't think, figure that out. They have the depreciation table of 5 years, fully depreciate an asset, like a lot of businesses do, because this is your business, man. You got to figure all these things out. If you can't just say, oh, gas, I'll just put gas. I'm like, no, sir, it doesn't work like that. And most drivers, that's what they do. In all our comments, I read it. They go, oh, just gas alone is $80. I'm like, that's just the least of your worries, buddy.
Yeah.
You worry about insurance and all this stuff.
That's just the one you feel every day.
Yeah. So I'm like,
I'll take it even once. I'll take it one step further, David. If you could get this set up, this would be like a no nonsense thing here. If you gave that tool to people to be able to know, their depreciation, how much they need to set aside for taxes, how much they need to set aside for a new car, the different costs associated. But you take it one step further, and then you actually take their earnings and you put it into different accounts for them that they can access fully, but it automatically does it. So every time you cash out, every time you get paid weekly or whatever, X amount of dollars goes into this account, X amount of dollars goes into this account. And then that way you don't even have to think about it. It's there. And then let's say you need something, you need a new car. Hey, now you got your new car right there. You got your fund right there. Hey, I need taxes. Oh shit, I just spent out all of my money. I made $5,000 last week and I spent it all, but I didn't pay my taxes. So now you have that money there. So I mean, who knows if that's good? That's something there. But
no, I think so. I think it starts off with even just net earnings, which is the one that you have mostly there. We haven't got it over the hump. It's just, it's $7 is actually $5.10 or whatever that is.
No, currently net earnings are not going to be there for a lot of drivers continue driving. I don't think it's going to be there.
Sure. Well, it looks like Sergio is
Show Me the Money Club.
Yeah, so Show Me the Money Club. It's a live show with Sergio and myself over on the Rideshare Guy. We do it on YouTube. It's also live casted to Twitter and to Facebook. So you don't have to be there, but it is under the Rideshare Guy handles. So make sure you're there. It's Tuesdays. It's pretty much every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. If you're elsewhere in the world, because we have people in Australia, France, and other places that are listening in now, watching. So that's pretty cool to see. But you could make sure you get that same time. It's the same time every single week. And on top of that, then we do clips from the show, but we also have it on audio podcast that's available the following day. So if you don't want to watch the video or just listen or whatever, maybe you're in the car. Some drivers are listening while we're in the car, or while they're in the car, we're in with them. They're either listening, educating passengers, whatever it might be. So it's on all podcasting platforms as well. So yeah, come check us out, hang out. We have guests on. We've had Steve and David on for a show before. Probably come back again soon at some point. But we have different guests. So we not only cover Uber and Lyft, but we also do talk about food delivery. We've had a couple of people on. Zach Drives Fast. We've had
Pedro,
a couple other people within different aspects, and we're still continuing to bring other people on, guests wise, who are experts in their fields, whether it's rideshare, food delivery, whether it's something else, whether it's last mile delivery, whatever it might be, some of these different apps that are available, different resources, things like that. So we just want to say, come check us out if you haven't already.
I don't know why the echo. I don't know why the echo. Drive me nuts. But I really want to thank these guys. I want to thank these guys. I want to thank these guys for joining us and check out the show. And come back here next week and check out. Next week we're going to be talking about some DoorDash, and we have Pedro, DoorDash Santiago. We have Kim's Side Money Plans, and we have Dashing Trader. We're going to talk about the last year of DoorDash and kind of the collapse that's happening there, and the aggravations that Dashers are facing. So, but Chris, Sergio, thank you so much. David, as always, thank you.
Thank you,
And
guys.
Thanks for having
look
us
forward
on,
to
too.
Money Club.